York City. We back. The Big Apple. NY. The Knicks are back. Staten Mellow. This dedicated to my city, New York. Official kings in the court. Reach for the ball, a hard lesson gets taught. So bring your skills to the nearest playground. No clown around. Catch a helmet in the minute on a New York playground. The Big Apple's what they call it for short. And basketball is our sport. We play for keeps and never settle for sure. So bring your game when you come to my town. We snatching crowds. You get embarrassed on the court after you shook to the ground. You get respected when you prove you get down. So save the joke for the clowns. And NYC, we known to go a few rounds. This is the city where you're forced to go hard. You'll get booed out of Dodge and shown the door being the weakest on squads. Rucker Park and summer nights, they stay live. Brothers play for the pride and bragging rights on who's the king of NY. So grab the pill and prepare to go hard. Pick your 12-man squad. Orange and blue better believe we go hard. This for my city, New York City where it's gritty. Yeah. For my city, never pretty. New York City, sing it with me. Yeah. For my city, New York City where it's gritty. NYC, for my city, never pretty. Yeah. New York City, sing it with me.
New York City, sing it with me. Still's the great Knicks Talk Nation every Monday, 10 to 11. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Your boy is back at it again. And, shout out to everybody out there in Knicks Nation, man. I know that we're going through some hard times right now, man. The team is on a slide. We're currently riding a losing streak. Things aren't looking as good as they did last season. But, we got a lot to talk about and a lot of soul searching to do as fans. They have a lot of soul searching to do as a team, as an organization, because right now it's not looking good in Knick land. You know what I mean? So we're going to talk a lot about all of that today, man. We're going to talk about this loss over the weekend, you know what I mean, to the Denver Nuggets, which I wasn't easy about that game going into that game, because I know that Denver, regardless of the fact they're suffering a lot of injuries, they do have one of the better players in the league in Nikola Jokic. They do have some great supporting cast members. Will Barton is there. He's a crafty veteran. I mean, they're missing Jamal Murray, but I kind of knew that they were going to come into the Garden and give the Knicks the best shot that they can give them, and they actually ended up winning the game. So, the result of that game was 113-99. Of course, the man that I just was talking about, Nikola Jokic, led the way with 32 points, 11 boards, and he dished out 5 assists. He is one of the best big men in the game. He was an MVP candidate last year. He's one of the brighter stars in the NBA this year. So, the Knicks had their work cut out for them, especially when we're kind of frail and fragile up front as it is. A common theme that happens with New York in these days is that they let anybody come to the Garden and have a career night against them. That didn't change, outside of Nikola Jokic having a big night. Zeke Nanjai, yes, I said it, Zeke Nanjai finished the game with 21 points, and he had 8 boards, which was a career high for him. So, that's just the times that we're in right now with the Knicks, man. And, it's a lot that's going on with the team. It doesn't look like the same bunch of guys from last year that actually like playing with each other. It looks like it's a struggle every time down the floor on offense. It looks like the team has fell apart on the defensive end. So we got a lot of soul searching to do, man, as far as the team is concerned. But to go to the Knicks side of things, of course, Julius Randle, who is their so-called best player, had 24 points, had eight assists, and he also had 7 boards in a losing effort. Evan Fournier, he had a decent game, chipped in 15 points, but it wasn't enough, and the Knicks fell again. It's not a thing of them losing, but they're losing games at home. The Knicks are currently, they lost 4 out of their last 6 games. They lost 3 straight. They lost 3 straight home games. Their record at home is now 5-7. And their overall record this season is 11-12. We're 1 game below 500. We're currently in the 11th seed of the Eastern Conference. And since they benched Kemba Walker, the team has been 0-3. So, Tom Thibodeau kind of jumped the gun early with benching Walker. So it's a good and it's a bad thing. It's good that the team, and I hate to say it, it's good that the team actually are struggling without him, because now it doesn't totally kill his trade value. It looks like it's more problems going on with the Knicks than meets the eye. So I guess with December 15th looming, teams will probably feel like, okay, the Knicks were utilizing Kemba Walker the wrong way, and we're going to take a chance on them. And there's a lot of people out there that's unhappy with their teams. We're going to get to that a little bit later. But they're 0-3 since benching Kemba Walker. Now, after the game, Tom Thibodeau, he took a very long time to greet the media. It took at least 20 minutes to greet the media, and that's unlike him. So obviously the losing is starting to wear on him. I mean, he lost the team in Minnesota early when he was with the Timberwolves, and I know that, he's in fear of probably losing this current group that he has right now. But nonetheless, Thibodeau came out, he faced the media as a man, and the reporters asked him some tough questions, man. Namely, Mark Berman from the New York Post. Shout out to Mark Berman. He's always looking to break new Knicks stories. He's always on point with his questions, and he's not afraid to ask the tough questions. So, being that the Knicks haven't changed much since they benched Kemba Walker, Mark Berman asked him, well, now that Kemba's out of the lineup, the team is still losing. Is there more moves to come? And Thibodeau didn't shy away from it. He gave a big speech about, you got to look at the process. You got to look and see if guys are actually playing hard, if it's the approach to the game, if it's the schematic ways that we're approaching the game that is, affecting the play of the players. Like, you got to look at everything. But long story short, he basically said that, more changes are to come. Now, that's very interesting because you brought in Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier in the offseason to kind of alleviate the load that Julius Randle carried last year for the Knicks. Now, we knew that we was trading defense for offense, so no one should be surprised that, Kemba Walker wasn't the greatest defensive player out there. Evan Fournier wasn't the greatest defensive player out there. Our problem last year was scoring the basketball, which was so hard to do because we ran the offense through Julius Randle, and when teams doubled and triple teamed him, he was like a fish out of water. He couldn't adjust, and the Knicks couldn't score easy baskets, and they couldn't score baskets at all. So they addressed the problem by getting rid of Reggie Bullock and also getting rid of Elfrid Payton, because it seemed like those two guys were, the guys that was the problem. They were liabilities on defense, namely, like, just to point out how bad it was with Reggie Bullock, even though he bought a lot on the defensive end. On the defensive end, he bought a lot, but on the offensive end, he did nothing, and it's to the point where on the offensive end, Atlanta exposed him to the point where they would put Trae Young, who's maybe 6 feet, 6'1". Reggie Bullock is a legit 6'6", 6'7". They basically disrespected that man and put Trae Young on him in a playoff series, and the Knicks failed to make him, work on defense, and they failed to punish Trae Young down low by putting him on a guy like Reggie Bullock. So the Knicks made the necessary changes of, let's go get some offense and substitute the defense for offense. If all works well, we'll be a potent offensive team. We buckle down on defense because Tibbs is known as a defensive guru, and he can possibly get anybody to play defense. But as of now, it doesn't look like that's the case. So I guess the next big question that I have is, if I was Mark Berman, is it Tibbs' approach? And quite frankly, I really do think that a lot of the problem is Tibbs' approach. I think that Coach Tibbs is living in the past in the way that he actually coaches basketball right now. The game has changed. He's used to having a guy like Derrick Rose, who was the youngest MVP in NBA history, running the show, carrying the team, and everybody else just following and feeding off of Derrick Rose's energy. This is why Derrick Rose basically followed Coach Tibbs everywhere he's been since Chicago. After he left Chicago, Tibbs went to Minnesota. Derrick Rose went to Minnesota for a short stint. After Minnesota, Tibbs ends up in New York. Well, Derrick Rose was here before Tibbs, but Tibbs ended up in New York. And shortly after that, they went out and got Derrick Rose in free agency, and Tibbs added him to the team. Now, if you look at the Atlanta series last year, one of the worst moves that I think that Tibbs made was basically changing the lineup and changing the flow of what the Knicks were doing all season long when it came to the playoffs. You know, once he moved Elfrid Payton out of the starting lineup, things went down very fast. You know, granted, Elfrid Payton was a liability to a degree on offense. He brought it on defense, and he also played hard as well. He wasn't the greatest guard that we had last year, but he was an important piece to why they had a successful season. He played hard on a majority of nights, whether he was affecting the game scoring-wise or not. He played hard, and he was part of the chemistry that was built throughout the season. So I feel like when Tibbs tinkered with that lineup, it hurt the team, you know, and the Knicks got exposed, and they were eliminated from the playoffs in 5 games. It was a gentleman's sweep. You know, we learned a lot of things. We learned that Tibbs needed to do a better job of in-game adjustments. And we also learned that Julius Randle needs to work on his game in regards to adding more to his arsenal to make guys pay. When they take away one thing from you, you should be able to go to another part of your game, like posting up guys, you know, making it easy on yourself, moving without the basketball. Like, we thought that he was going to come back as a much better polished player this offseason, especially after the Knicks rewarded him and after he had an all-star season last year. But that hasn't happened. You know what I mean? And before I move any further, I want to say shout out to everybody that's out there checking us out on Bars and Hoops Radio. Shout out to everybody that's out there on Facebook and on YouTube checking us out. The number that you can call in is 516-206-0711. Stills the great flying solo tonight. We're here every Monday, 10 to 11. You know what I mean? I'm interested in hearing everyone's point in regards to the current state of the Knicks. Now, back to Coach Tibbs. Kenny Smith made some interesting comments the other day. And, you know, a lot of people are out there, you know, saying that, you know, Kemba Walker is washed up. You know, his time is up. He's a liability on defense, yada, yada, yada. He's the reason why the Knicks are losing, right? Now, I beg to differ, and Kenny Smith also begs to differ. In some exclusive comments that he made to TMZ, Kenny Smith basically said that, you know, he has all the respect in the world for Coach Tibbs and what he's done for the game and, you know, the defensive intensity that he brings to the game and he demands from his players. But you have a guy like Kemba Walker, you knew that he was a defensive liability coming into the season. You went out in the offseason and picked him up. You knew what you were getting. You were getting an offensive player. Now you turn around and you can't use him. And Kenny Smith basically said, you don't know how to use him. You don't know how to utilize him and his skill set and what you're doing. It's like, he said, to be exact, he said, it's like having a Ferrari, but you don't know how to drive a Ferrari. You know what I mean? And I think that's what's going on with Coach Tibbs. And let's just take it a step further. This is the deepest team that the Knicks have had in quite some time. We have a combination of veterans that are proven. We have high draft picks that aren't bad, that can actually play. And we have young guys that we just drafted that prove that they can play, but being that Tibbs, again, stuck in his old school ways, he doesn't play rookies as much, or young guys for that matter of fact. He sticks with the older guys, and, you know, that's who he rolls with. Brings us to the next point of, okay, you substitute Kemba Walker out of the starting lineup for Alec Burke. Now, face value, it looked like it was a good move the first game that it happened. You know, Alec Burke had a great game. He had about 25 points. They won that game. He brought a different dynamic to the team. He's not a point guard. He's a scorer. Same as Kemba Walker. He's not a point guard. He's a natural scorer that needs the ball in his hand to create. He's not a guy that you can say, okay, go run in the corner, wait for the ball to come to you and just shoot the open jump shot. That's not his game. He's a natural leader. He's a controller. He likes to control the ball. He's played that way his whole career, from high school to college to the pros when he was in Charlotte and early in his career. He was a lethal all-star point guard or scoring guard, for that matter, that put the ball in the hole. That was his MO. Even when he went to Boston, the same thing. You had guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum that wanted to shoot the ball. And, Marcus Smart kind of put those guys on blast for being selfish players. So Kemba didn't fit there as well, because instead of him taking over, he just was trying to fit in. And I think that he tried to do the same thing here in New York. He came to grips with, okay, I'm finally back home. He was happy about being back home, but him taking a back seat to Julius Randle ended up being the demise of his career here in New York, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better, And I agree with what Kenny Smith said. At the end of the day, I don't think the problem is Kemba Walker. I just think that the problem is the approach with how Coach Tibbs is coaching his team. And we could talk about his rotations. Obi Toppin clearly deserves more minutes, but due to politics and due to Julius Randle making the money that he makes, you want to justify why you're paying that man. So if you're really going to discipline guys and really reward people for what they bring to the court and what they bring to the game, Obi Toppin should be getting just as much minutes as Julius Randle. You need to find ways to make them work together on the floor. It's clear that whenever that second unit comes in, it's led by Quickly, Toppin, and Rose. And this was a theme that went back to the playoffs last year in Atlanta. They showed a certain chemistry that they had. Obi Toppin showed you his versatility. He doesn't need to get the ball in his hand to be effective. All he does is he moves without the ball. He gets easy baskets and he runs the floor and he finishes. That's what you need. He's like a Amari Stoudemire, Sean Marion type of player. We spoke about this last week. Shout out to my brother Michael Ray. Hopefully he's checking in. He'll probably call in a little bit later, but Obi Toppin is that type of player. He's gradually gotten better on every level. He started out slow. Shout out to his father, Obadiah Toppin Sr. He said since he was in high school, he was a kid that always, started out slow. Once he recognized and picked up on the speed of the game, he's improved and he's gotten better. He's done it on the high school level. He's done it at Dayton. And now he's doing it and he's proven it in the NBA, because everywhere you turn to now and every story that you read about the Knicks, people are saying that Obi Toppin needs more playing time. And Tibbs deserves to give him more playing time because, quite frankly, he's earned it. You know what I mean? But that remains to be seen. So Kenny Smith chimed in, said what he had to say. I agree with Kenny Smith. Julius Randle now, after losing Saturday night's game, he made some interesting comments and he came out and said some things. Seemed like he was taking a jab against the cross-bridge rivals in Brooklyn. But he basically came out and said that, the team needs to find their identity. They need to figure out what it is that they want to do. And it's not like, they have 3 to 4 stars like Brooklyn. I found that to be quite interesting by him saying that, but he was in his bag and he felt the way he felt. But he said that the main issue is definitely on the defensive end, and guys really need to dig deep and find a way to get some of these wins, especially at home. Now, while I agree with Julius Randle and his sentiments, I believe that a lot of the Knicks' issues this year stems from him. Now, don't get me wrong. I appreciated his season that he had last year. He had a breakout season. He improved his game. He deserved every penny that he got this offseason. He was an all-star, most improved player of the year. He gained some recognition around the league for a guy that turned over a new leaf. But this season, it seems like he's regressed back to the old ways and the Julius Randle that we saw during his first season here as a New York Knick. The turnovers are up. Again, I can't completely blame the player. I have to place blame on Tibbs because, again, you're empowering this man. You're putting the ball in your worst decision maker's hand. You're putting your ball in the worst dribbler's. His handle is not strong enough to basically run the flow of an offense. And you can see the way that the team is out of sync at times. You know, the Knicks can play fluent basketball 1 minute, then the next minute the ball starts sticking. They look stagnant. Guys are forcing shots, and every shot that they take, it seems like it's tough. They got to work twice as hard than their opponent to score baskets. And, you know, it's early in the season. We're 23 games in, and the team doesn't look anywhere close to what they did last year. Shout out to Chris C. So he said, so what does Randle think of himself then? If you're going to lead, show it. He doesn't sound like he don't have the hunger since he got the bag. And I do agree with you, Chris. I think that, you know, he's reading his highlight clippings. You know, he's getting his commercials. As you said, he got the bag. So now his approach is a little different. I mean, they say once you make it here in New York, that's it. You know what I mean? So I think he is a little content. I think that a lot of it has gone to his head. And I think that he turned, and this is just me looking from the outside in. I may be wrong. He may have gotten, you know, some of his teammates to look at him sideways like, okay, he's a different guy now. You know, he got the bag. He got some notoriety. He's the man now here in New York, but he's not sharing the basketball. And it shows. Sometimes you can see it on with the body language of some of the players. Him and Evan Fournier, they had a few arguments on the court this year because of the way that Julius Randle is handling his business on the court. You know, he's not sharing the basketball. He is making careless decisions and having ridiculous turnovers. He is shooting entirely too much from the perimeter for me. I come from the era where if you're a big man, bring your ass down the box and make guys pay down low. Julius Randle isn't a fat guy. He has a tremendous body. He's in great shape. And the referees even gave him credit when they said that they have to manage and referee the game a little bit different with him because he's so much stronger than his opponents. Now, with that being said, I said this in the offseason that every video highlight clip that I saw of Julius Randle would only be working on his handle, dancing with the basketball, shooting contested threes, shooting contested jump shots. Not once did you ever see him practicing a low post game. You know, I think a guy like him would really benefit himself by reaching out to the man down in Houston, who's arguably one of the greatest big men that ever played the game of basketball, and Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. Go down there and enter his big man camp, because Julius Randle, if he had a really serious low post game, he would be next to damn near unstoppable. You see what Amari Stoudemire did when he went to go work with Hakeem. When he lost most of his athleticism, he said, okay, I'm going to work on my footwork. His low post game changed tremendously after one season, you know, when he wasn't living above the rim anymore. And I think that Julius Randle needs to take a page out of that book if he truly wants to get his game better and move to the next level. Oh, we got a caller. Definitely got a caller. Knicks Talk Nation. Knicks Talk Nation Radio. Who's this?
This is Bar Kim.
Bar Kim, what's happening? What's happening,
Is
champ?
this David Wilson?
No, this isn't David Wilson, my brother. This is Stills the Great. You are now tuned in to Knicks Talk Nation Radio. We talking everything
Right.
Knicks. What's going on, my brother?
Nothing, man. I'm just giving a call. I was just giving a call because my man David Wilson is, you know, we grew up as child friends, so I'm just giving a shout out.
Oh man, that's a great look, man. Shout out to Dave and those guys, man. Their show, they tune in. They definitely come on early in the day on Mondays. You catch, you know, First to the Next Stop every Monday from 4:30 to 6:30. That's when you'll catch Dave and those guys. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Their show. But right now, we talking Knicks basketball. But before you go, what do you think about the New York Knicks situation right now?
Well, right now, I'm a New York diehard. I mean, any New York team I'm with, so it don't matter. It is what it is.
Oh, so you one of those guys that like the Nets too?
Yeah, but they New York.
Yeah, you gotta plant your flag, man. You gotta plant your flag, my brother. But listen, man, I respect your opinion, man, and I appreciate you calling in and checking in on the station, man. We really appreciate it. I'll tell Dave that you checked in for him for sure.
Okay, thank you, my brother.
All right, my brother. Thank you, man. You enjoy the rest of your night.
Peace.
All right, peace. Yeah, man. So I really think that, Julius Randle, if he wants to take his game to the next level, he'll reach out to a guy like Hakeem Olajuwon and, work on his low post game, because I think that him and the Knicks, because of these analytics, they settle entirely too much for the 3-point shot. Entirely too much, to the point where it gets sickening. Every chance that I see them, they're just jacking up threes because of analytics. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of them are open, but when they come down and everybody wants to be Steph Curry, it doesn't look good and it looks like ugly basketball. I must admit that. But, like Julius Randle said, the Knicks are a complete team, but they don't have 3 to 4 stars like Brooklyn. And I kind of agree with him there, but I think that a lot of the problems start and end with him on the offensive end of the ball and, from a teammate standpoint, because people have gone as far as, showing little instances where even when it's time to inbound the basketball, if you got a point guard in the game, big man, go to the baseline, inbound the basketball to the guard, hustle down, get into position on offense. Julius Randle will look at the ball like it's a foreign object, look at the point guard, have the point guard inball the basketball to him. He'll bring the ball down the court, dance with the rock, turn the ball over, or take a contested shot or an uncontested shot way too early in the shot clock and kill the whole flow of the offense. And then the team's body language just shows and they become deflated, and it seeps into the defensive end of the ball. I don't know if he's looking at tape to see that, but if you have 2 pairs of eyes, you can see that that's where a lot of the problems stem as far as the Knicks are concerned. Now, somebody else that was asked today to come out and speak on the current state of the Knicks was Kemba Walker himself. He opened up about being benched. Kemba, thus far this season, he was averaging 11 points and 3 assists before the benching. So that's 11 points that you can use right now because, with the current state of the Knicks, as far as our guard situation is concerned, you can't depend solely on Derrick Rose to carry the team again. We saw what happened to him last year when he broke down. Emmanuel Quickly, he's not a point guard either. He's a combo guard that can score. Primarily his game is from the perimeter. He doesn't really set guys up, get guys involved. He's a scorer. He's a high volume scoring guard. So, taking a guy like Kemba Walker out of the lineup hurt the Knicks not only on the defensive end, because he wasn't playing defense, but on the offensive end as well. But back to Kemba. Kemba basically opened up about being benched. This was the first time in his career, he said, that he's ever been benched. But he's a pro and he's a team guy. He's a team first guy. So kudos to him for admitting that it hurts. It's a different feeling for him, but he's come to grips with it because of the point where he is in his career. Now, obviously, everybody knows that he's been dealing with knee trouble. He's been dealing with knee injuries for the longest. He hasn't been able to play back-to-back games, but the demise of his career here, according to Thibodeau, was on the defensive end. But when Leon Rose brought him in, it wasn't because of the defensive end. They brought him in to be a scorer. You know what I mean? So kudos to him for acknowledging that it does hurt. This is the first time that he's going through it. But he said that, he wants to be a role model for these guys. He's trying to be a professional player, a pro at it. He's dealing with the decision. He wasn't happy with it, but he's living with it because at the end of the day, he knows that he's been blessed to have the ability to make it big and make it to the pros and play a sport that he grew up loving and admiring as a kid. So he's taking it all in stride. And who knows? This may not be the end of Kemba Walker. It may be the end of his career here in New York. But that remains to be seen. But let's move on to RJ Barrett. Now, RJ Barrett is in a totally different barrel now. I think that a lot of his play was one due to the illness that he had in Brooklyn. He spoke about being sick in Brooklyn, running back and forth from the locker room to the floor, the vomit and things like that. So he shook off a little bug that he had in Brooklyn. But the other day in New York, he had a bad game. He's been having a string of bad games as of late. And I think that a lot of RJ's problems is that he's also not in the flow of the game. The risk that you run by running the offense through Julius Randle is that, guys are stagnant and they're running into a corner to become spot up shooters when that's not their game. RJ, to me, is suffering because of that. Because if you look at RJ's career, when he was in Duke, he was the guy that ran the show. He was the guy that was the engine that made that team go. Zion Williamson was the finisher. RJ Barrett was the explosive guy that would attack the basket, shoot the mid-range jumper, play intense on defense, and get the team going. Here in New York, playing alongside Julius Randle, it hasn't been that way. They've turned him into a spot-up shooter. He doesn't nearly get to create as much as he should be creating with the ball. And truth be told, I would feel more comfortable running the offense through RJ Barrett than Julius Randle, because RJ Barrett's game is more complete than Julius Randle. If you ask me, Julius Randle is a volume guy. He needs to have the ball in his hand to be effective. RJ Barrett can play both ways. He can move without the ball, and he can definitely create when he has the ball. Again, like I said, back in Duke, he showed flashes of being a point guard, even though he was a scoring guard. But he showed you that he can finish, he can find guys, he can knock down the open jumper, and he can defend. As of late, under this new regime with Tibbs, it's been up and down with him. And Tibbs kind of called him out, saying that he needs to work on his game. He needs to do a little bit more on his game. And I do agree, but I do believe that RJ Barrett is a talented basketball player that the Knicks need to focus on getting more involved in the game. Again, don't forget the number to call in is 516-206-0711. Stills the Great, Knicks Talk Nation Radio. Taking all your calls, man, and chiming in and watching everybody on Facebook and YouTube as well. So keep the comments coming, and we'll keep them rolling on the show. One of the latest things that also has been put out there is Obi Toppin receiving more playing time and possibly coming into the starting lineup. Now, the trick is, where would you put him if you added him to the starting lineup? Because truth be told, Mitchell Robinson, I love Mitch. He's a liability on offense. You get nothing out of him outside of defense. A few lobs he'll finish. He'll definitely grab a few offensive rebounds. He did have a boatload of offensive rebounds the other day, so he is a force down low. And against Philadelphia, he made Joel Embiid look like a small fry the time that he did come back and play against the 76ers. So, Mitchell Robinson, he is an asset, but to me, he's injury prone, and he is expendable if you ask me. Now, back to Obi Toppin. If you were to add Obi Toppin to the lineup, where would you put him? Would you play him as a 3? Would you play him as a 5? Would you move him to the 4, move Julius Randle to the 5? There's so many ways you can go about it with Obi, because he's 6'7", 6'8", legit. He's athletic. He crashes the boards, and he runs the floor. So he's an asset for you on the offensive end as well as the defensive end, because he's playing defense as well. And the statistics are showing that when he's in the game, he adds that needed spark that the Knicks need, him and Quickly. Now, the problem with adding a guy like him to the starting lineup is that you take away from the second unit that has brought our team back in games many a times. That's the risk that you run by adding him to the starting lineup now. But truth be told, when the Knicks drafted Obi Toppin, they drafted Obi Toppin with the intent of him potentially being the star player at the 4, and the Knicks were eventually going to shop Julius Randle. But being that Randle had such a great season, they felt that, Tibbs got through to him, turned him into a better basketball player, and that, maybe we got a future here with Julius Randle, and he turned over a new leaf. But obviously this season, It hasn't materialized. The team has regressed. Julius Randle has regressed. And the Knicks are looking, not like the same team that liked each other last year. Granted, their record isn't that much off than it was last year. They were basically a 500 basketball team for the first 25 to 30 games last season until they ran off, I believe it was 12, 13 straight games. And that's what put them over the hump, and that's what got them to the 41 win total because of that large winning streak that they had in the middle of the season last year. So something like that can happen again, but the way that it looks right now, this team doesn't look like a team that likes each other as much as they did last year. They're clearly out of sync because they don't have a real identity on offense. They take entirely too many jump shots. They take entirely too many threes, and they're not putting enough pressure on the defense by attacking the basket. And I think that that's something that has to change if they plan on changing the way that this team looks moving forward. Right now, currently, we sit as the 11th seed. We wouldn't even make the play-in tournament. So, the Knicks have a lot, and they have a large hill to climb up, moving forward. As far as the rumors, and we like rumors here in New York. In New York, we getting everybody when it comes to the trade deadline. We gonna get this player. We just trade this player, that player, this player, and then now we right back into the championship round. I was one of those guys as well. That was an unrealistic thinker when it came to the Knicks and trade scenarios and things like that. But the difference between this current Knicks team and Knicks teams in the past is we have assets. We have young players. We have veterans that are tradable and movable. And we also have draft capital. We own all of our draft picks moving forward. And we own some of the other teams' draft picks, like the Dallas teams of the world, the Denver Nugget teams of the world, via the Carmelo Anthony trade. So we also have draft capital to add in any move that we make moving forward. So that puts us in a great position. Now, the only problem is that we can't really start wheeling and dealing until December 15th. The official trade, the start of the trading season in the NBA, where guys that sign guys in the offseason can now move them, starting in December 15th. Now, there's a lot of things going on around the league. I mean, the worst kept secret in the world was that, Damian Lillard, as much as he goes out in public and says that he wants to stay with the Blazers for the rest of his career, it's not looking like that. Chauncey Billups, who's a former Knick, basically started off the relationship on a rocky road when he said that he's not convincing anybody to stay because he went through it with Carmelo Anthony. So he's not coming to Portland to beg anybody to stay. If guys want to stay, they can stay. If they want to leave, he's not trying to convince anybody to stay. So I think that him and Damian Lillard aren't on the same page. If you look at Dame Lillard's stats this year, he's looking like he's extraterrestrial out there. He's not showing like he's interested in the game. It doesn't seem like Billups is having the effect that the organization probably thought that he would have on him. They just lost their GM due to situations outside of basketball. And they don't have a deep team. They didn't make any off-season moves. He's trying to be professional about it. He's not trying to request a trade because he says that he doesn't want to be remembered as one of those guys that just wanted to jump ship and go play with the all-star lineup of players and win an easy championship. He wanted to take the hard road. It reminds me of Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony gave Denver his all, gave them 8 straight seasons of going to the postseason whenever he played with that team. As soon as he got there, they turned into a playoff contender instantly. As a matter of fact, him and Dwayne Wade were the only two from that draft class that led their team to the playoffs, during their first season. You know what I mean? So Damian Lillard is taking a page out of Carmelo Anthony's book. He's not asking to be traded, but the way that he's playing, his body language, and what he's not saying is clear to everybody that eventually he probably wants to move on and go to a situation where it makes more sense to him. Now, the latest rumor, now since we're talking about the rumors, is that Lillard apparently wants to play with Ben Simmons. Now, at face value, like, well, they're both technically point guards. But when you look at Dame Lillard, he, like Kemba Walker and like Steph Curry, they aren't really traditional point guards. These guys are scoring guards that, take a lot of shots, but they also get their teammates involved, and they're hella talented. Now, that scenario of having Ben Simmons play alongside Damian Lillard is very interesting. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen in Philadelphia, because Philadelphia is Joel Embiid's team. The Philadelphia fans would never forgive Ben Simmons for the way that he acted this season, when he didn't improve his game, when he didn't develop a jump shot, when he didn't work on developing his game to make guys pay when they play off of him on the offensive end and give him the open shot. So Ben Simmons has nobody but Ben Simmons to blame. Now, if you put him in a backcourt with Damian Lillard, I think that's an upgrade to any team, including the Portland Trailblazers, if that was to happen. So that would mean that the Trailblazers would have to move somebody like a CJ McCollum and a bunch of other pieces in draft capital to make something like the Ben Simmons trade works, because Ben Simmons makes a lot of money and the numbers have to match up. You have to send out the amount of salary, especially if you're capped out. You have to match salaries to make sure you're not going over the cap, if I'm not mistaken. So a lineup of Ben Simmons and Damian Lillard anywhere would instantly improve a team, because Ben Simmons, being the unselfish player that he is, would fit perfect with Damian Lillard. Even though he's unselfish, Dame Lillard can put his foot on the gas and be the alpha male on offense at any given time. I think the problem and why it hasn't worked in Portland is because CJ McCollum and Dame Lillard are basically the same players. You know what I mean? CJ McCollum isn't a defensive stopper like a guy like Ben Simmons is. So I keep harping on these two, because when you really look at it, maybe that's an option that the Knicks need to explore. You know what I mean? You're killing two birds with one stone by not only getting one of them, but getting both of them. You're getting a guy that Tibbs like, that can attack and score the basketball, and you're also getting a guy that defends in Ben Simmons, that has the size that you can put him on any team's best wing player, and 9 times out of 10, he'll give them a hard time and lock them down because of his size alone. And he can create. Let's not forget, coming out of college, Ben Simmons was projected to be the next LeBron James. Now, he does have all the physical tools to do it. It's just his work ethic. Does he have the work ethic to get to that point? I think that's something that the Knicks should explore, because it's a crazy dynamic. The Knicks have the pieces to make it happen, and they have the coach that can make this type of lineup work. You know what I mean? Now, in order to get somebody like this, or these two players, what will it eventually cost the Knicks? It's definitely going to cost a series of draft picks. Now, I know a lot of our fans, they don't want to hear that, because they don't want the quick fixes. I get that. But when you look at the two, okay, Damian Lillard is in the prime of his career, right? Ben Simmons he's not even in the prime of his career. So once Lillard eventually moves on, Ben Simmons will be peaking in his prime, and you have your point guard of the future moving forward. Because don't get it twisted. Yes, he doesn't have a jump shot, but he does affect the game on the offensive end, because he can pass, he can also defend, and the thing that is his weakness is the free throw. So that's something that will have to be worked on. But I think that a guy like Tibbs can bring the best out of a Ben Simmons, Damian Lillard combination, if that was to ever happen here in New York. That's something I would keep my eyes on. As a Knicks fan, as a Knicks executive, I would monitor those two situations. We already know that Ben Simmons isn't coming back to Philadelphia. And by the way that things look, the Trailblazers are not making the playoffs in a weaker Western Conference. They don't have any draft capital. and they don't have any real assets to give anybody to make any real splash via the trade market. So the Knicks should be paying attention to that situation very closely, and they should try to figure out a way to get those two guys here in the fold, if you ask me, because right now the team needs a big makeup change. Alec Burke, I like him. You know, he's a scorer. He's a Chauncey Billups-like player, like we spoke about, you know, the past week. He is a guy that can actually, you know, create. He can put pressure on the defense, and he does that. But he's not the answer at point guard because he's not a point guard. And, you know, the experiment of adding him to the starting lineup, it hasn't improved the team defensively, and it really hasn't improved the team offensively either. So I think that, you know, the Knicks should really keep their eyes open for that type of situation. Now, another situation that I believe the Knicks should keep their eyes on, it's actually two. I think that the Knicks should look into possibly getting Russell Westbrook. Now, I know a lot of people are like, are you crazy? Why would you want Westbrook? He's just a stat guy, this, stat, and the third. But as I said on our Sunday show, and shout out to everybody that checks us out every Sunday from 4 to 6 on Bars and Hoops Radio, you know, at the Bars and Hoops Radio show, Russell Westbrook is the type of guard that Tibbs loves. Him and Derrick Rose are basically the same guys. You know, they both attack the basket. They both play intense defense, and they both can create for other guys. As we know, we call him Triple-Double Russell, a.k.a. Brody, because he gets guys involved. But the thing with Russell Westbrook that I think everybody is starting to realize is that he can't play with a plethora of all-stars because he's a guy that needs the ball in his hands. The best scenario for him was playing with Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant isn't a selfish guy, and Kevin Durant doesn't need the ball in his hand to be effective. But ever since Kevin Durant left OKC, Russell Westbrook has won an MVP. Russell Westbrook has, you know, broken the triple-double record, broke Oscar Robertson's record, but he's proven that he can't play with other alphas that dominate the basketball. I mean, he adjusts after midseason, but it takes him a while to adjust. I think that if the Knicks were to find a way to move pieces to get him here in New York, he would instantly rejuvenate the franchise. He would rejuvenate his career because he is a big fashion guy. Even though he's a guy from LA, I think that a change of scenery like a New York City would really do wonders for his career, and it'll do wonders for the Knicks. Yes, he's coming off a serious injury, but you see no remnants or effect of him slowing down due to a knee injury. He's still the same intense guy on offense. He attacks the basket. He plays defense. He's very intense, and I believe that Tibbs would love to have a guy like that. As a matter of fact, Tibbs was on record when he was traded from Washington saying that the Knicks should have been more aggressive in pursuing Russell Westbrook. So that's a name that I would definitely keep an eye on, you know, in the coming weeks heading into the trade deadline, because right now it's not working in LA. You got Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis, and Carmelo Anthony, and Dwight Howard. You got all of Rondo. You got all these guys, and the Lakers are looking terrible. I mean, part of it is Frank Vogel, but I just also think that, you know, Russell Westbrook can't play with a guy like LeBron James because they both need the ball in their hands to be effective. Now, you could try that, okay, you get yours, I get mine's theory, but that's proven to not work in the NBA as well either. I mean, we saw that in Washington with John Wall and Bradley Beal. It didn't work. It won't work. I think that a guy like Westbrook would definitely flourish in New York City in a Tibbs system because Tibbs would run the offense through him instead of Julius Randle. Now, what would it take to get a guy like Russ? I mean, Russell Westbrook makes a lot of money. He makes, I believe, $48 million within the next 2 years. So it's $40 million next year, and I think it's I'm sorry. It's 80-something million in the next 2 years. It's 40 1 year, and I believe 42 the following year after that. So he makes a lot of money. He's on the tail end of his contract, so it won't hurt the Knicks that bad heading into the future. And I think that it would give them a boost that they need right now if they can get him. Now, you'll definitely have to move somebody like a Mitchell Robinson. You probably may have to chip in and get somebody like not RJ, Julius Randle in that deal. You know what I mean? It remains to be seen how it works, but those are some guys that they would probably want in order to get Russell Westbrook here in New York. Another guy that people are talking about is Karl Anthony Towns. And we all know Karl Anthony Towns is a Knicks fan. Grew up in New Jersey. He's on record saying that he would love to play for the Knicks one day. Now, it is no secret that him and Tibbs at one particular point in time didn't see eye to eye. And I believe that, Tibbs was running guys into the ground. He was trying to toughen guys up like a Karl Anthony Towns. But I believe that a change of scenery will work for Cat. I believe that he'll probably put his differences to the side if he was to be able to come to and play with the Knicks. And he'd be closer to home. We all know that he lost his mom to COVID. His dad is around. His dad is very active with, the high school circuit. So I think that, and he's looking for a change of scenery. He was very honest during media day in Minnesota. He basically said that, he's been through regime changes. He's been through coaching changes. And, it's just like a revolving door in Minnesota. And they can't really attract any real free agents. Now, they got something in Anthony Edwards now. He's a great young player. They also have D'Angelo Russell. He's a great young player. But for some reason, it just doesn't seem like it's working in Minnesota for Cat. And I do think that he's kind of over it. And he needs a change of scenery. Now, I think out of the names that I mentioned, he's the most attainable and the most attractive piece to get. Why? Because he's a big man that can do the same thing that Julius Randle does, but he can punish you in the paint. The Knicks obviously don't have an identity of a big man in the paint that can get the ball down low and go to work, or take you outside and shoot the threes and shoot the lights out with the basketball as well. I know that a lot of people aren't too fond with the big man shooting the three, but this is just the way that the NBA is set up today. You look at guys like Jokic, you look at guys like Joel Embiid. These are guys that are able to stretch the floor, even though they're 7-footers, and make teams pay. So I would love the addition of having a guy like Karl Anthony Towns on the Knicks because it'll automatically give us an identity down low. And, we won't miss much, of swapping out a Karl Anthony Towns for Julius Randle. Now, the burning question is, can him and Tibbs coexist? You know what I mean? That will remain to be seen. But I think that, the Knicks are monitoring all of these situations very carefully. And the most realistic situations are, to me, the Karl Anthony Towns situation, because he's a Kentucky guy. He's a Coach Cal guy. Kenny Atkinson is a Kentucky guy. Julius Randle, Emmanuel Quickly. All of these guys have Kentucky connections and Kentucky roots. And I believe that something like that can happen. Now, in the perfect world, this is what I would hang my hat on, and I think that I would put money on this scenario possibly happening. I believe that, before the season is over, the latest rumor is that John Wall wants to play in Houston. I know a lot of people, again, are saying all these injury-prone guys. But again, a Kentucky guy, Coach Cal guy, he's the type of guard that Tibbs would like, attacks, plays defense, runs the floor very well. The perfect scenario for the Knicks right now to get the players that they want without mortgaging their future is waiting for John Wall to eventually be bought out by the Houston Rockets. He's going to have to take a huge haircut because he's making a lot of money out there. He's making Westbrook money out there. Taking a huge haircut and then signing John Wall as a free agent, which I believe he would come to New York, because what better place in the world to come than New York to revive your career? So I believe that the Knicks, and this is my wild prediction, that screw Westbrook, forget the Westbrook talk, but I believe that the Knicks will eventually sign John Wall as a free agent after he's bought out by the Washington. I mean, not the Washington Wizards. As he's bought out from the Houston Rockets, and I believe that the Knicks will go for the gusto and make a trade for Karl Anthony Towns. And then now we have the New York Wildcats, to be quite honest. But I believe that, John Wall and Karl Anthony Towns would love to play with each other. I think that it'll be a match made in heaven. I think Kenny Atkinson would play a tremendous role in that. And I think that the Knicks will immediately improve themselves if they were able to make that situation happen. Because now you'll have a low post presence and you'll have a guy that can control the offense, get other guys involved, and he can also score the basketball if you need him to. You know what I mean? Combine those guys with a guy like R.J. Barrett, because in order to make a trade like this happen, Julius Randle has to go. Mitchell Robinson has to go. You may have to get rid of one of the young gems that we have, that we drafted this year. It'll probably be a McBride or Grimes, Emmanuel Quickly, and possibly an Evan Fournier to get that deal done. And if the Knicks get that deal done, they'll balance the team out, and then there'll be a serious contender in the East. The days of the three-headed monster is over. Like, the Miami Heat was the last big three that actually is going to make some noise. I mean, if you look further than that, the Golden State Warriors is the last that we'll probably see of that scenario. But I truly believe that when it's all said and done, the Knicks will move heaven and hell to get Karl Anthony Towns and possibly sign John Wall, because they always say where there's smoke, there's fire. And I believe that John Wall is making noise for a reason, because he sees the opportunity to rejuvenate his career here in New York. And if the Knicks were smart, they'll be monitoring that situation and ready to pounce on that situation at first notice. You know what I mean? So before we get out of here, man, I want to say shout out to everybody that tuned in via Facebook. Shout out to everybody that tuned in on YouTube. Shout out to everybody that was listening on barsandhoopsradio.com. Don't forget, every Monday, 10 to 11, myself, Steals the Great, will give you the latest in Knicks Talk Nation news. You know what I mean? We definitely appreciate all the support that we get. And if you're looking to advertise or promote your business, don't forget, you can hit us up at barsandhoopsradio@gmail.com. If you ever wanted to donate to the cause, our Cash App is Bars and Hoops LLC. If you want to catch us on YouTube, catch all of the repeats that we have, it is on YouTube at Bars and Hoops Television. So don't forget, every Monday, Knicks Talk Nation Radio, hosted by yours truly, Stills the Great. So until next week, we'll see you same time, same channel. And on that note, we say peace.
New York City, we back. The Big Apple, NY. The Knicks are back. Staten Mellow. This dedicated to my city, New York. Official kings in the court. Reach with a ball of hard lesson gets taught. So bring your skills to the nearest playground. No clown around. Catch a helmet in a minute on a New York playground. The Big Apple's what they call it for short. And basketball is our sport. We play for keeps and never settle for short. So bring your game when you come to my town. We snatch a crowd. You get embarrassed on the court after you shook to the ground. You get respected when you prove to get down. So say the joke for the clowns. And NYC, we known to go a few rounds. This is the city where you're forced to go hard. You'll get booed out of Dodge and shown the door being the weakest on squads. Rucker Park and summer nights they stay live. Brothers play for the pride and bragging rights on who's the king of NY. So grab the pill and prepare to go hard. Pick your 12-man squad. Orange and blue better believe we go hard. This for my city, New York, New York City where it's gritty. Yeah. For my city, never pretty. New York City, sing it with me. Yeah. For my city, New York City where it's gritty. NYC, for my city, never pretty. Yeah. New York City, sing it with me.